Hi everybody and welcome to the Ripple channel. Ripple stands for Recreative In-Person Learning, and this video is going to be the first in a series where we take a look at the impact of remote learning, social distancing, and other quote-unquote safety guidelines and how they're affecting our kids, their well-being, their growth and development, and overall health. We'll also be looking into some alternatives that are available and that I'm providing myself. And if you like this video, subscribe, like, share if you think it's important and informative. Thanks. So now let's take a look at some of the research, some articles, and I'll offer some of my opinions and anecdotes. And I want to start by saying we all know the well-being and health of our children is our primary concern as parents, caretakers, educators, and policymakers. Well, at least it should be. And obviously the big concern right now is about our children becoming ill. And we know that one of the ways that that can happen is if they're around someone who's infected and they get infected, right? Well, that's according to germ theory, but that's for another video. However, we do know that isolation, lack of physical activity, and drastically increased amounts of screen time and time online are almost guaranteed to have at least one, if not multiple, serious negative consequences for our children's health and well-being. And I believe it's up to us to seek out and find alternatives. Because our kids deserve better than this. I mean, look at this 5-year-old depressed and crying trying to do school online. Can you imagine doing kindergarten online? We're going to take a look at this from 3 angles: socio-emotional development, cognitive development, and physical health, and how they're all related, because they all are interrelated, right? First, let's look at socio-emotional development. From Washington Post: remote school is putting kids under toxic stress. And they define toxic stress as repeated and persistent activation of the body's fight or flight response. And as a side note here, if you know about the immune system, you know being in fight or flight response turns it off. And we're getting triggered into that because we're so afraid of each other and we're treating other human beings like pathogens instead of fellow human beings. And we're teaching that to our kids while they're developing. And it's having negative impacts. It says here in the article, suicide hotlines are ringing off the hook. Mental health services are more in demand. 1 out of every 3 elementary students is losing skills in reading and writing. Their worlds have been turned upside down at a time when their brain is growing and changing faster than the speed of sound, all because of toxic stress. And I know some of you are probably thinking, well, we just have to deal with this because it's necessary. Is it though? We're going to talk about that in a second, but let's get back to the article. The disruption of virtual school is increasing the risk this generation of children will suffer from and die of heart disease and diabetes. It could reduce their lifelong earning potential and cripple their mental health. Forming healthy social and physical habits and promoting a love of learning are a vital process for school-age children that are integrally associated with lower chronic disease burden, higher economic earnings, and increased overall life satisfaction. So in other words, it's going to have catastrophic consequences for their entire lives. Now let's look at coronavirus here. It says they're still doing research, but it suggests that if children get sick, their illness is typically milder. Children do not spread the virus as much as adults, especially below the age of 12. So let's take a look at some of the numbers from this .gov website for Delaware, which is where I'm based out of. The rates are going up as far as infection and positive cases, but look, hospitalizations are going way down. And how many of those deaths and hospitalizations were kids? 0. That's right, 0. It's not even really negatively affecting the teenage population or middle-aged population that greatly. And we know there's been some discrepancies in how these numbers are getting counted in the first place anyway. That's for another video too. But what is affecting our kids? What are the major risks to their health if it's not coronavirus? And how are the guidelines going to make those worse? Well, let's look at them. From Children's Healthcare 2019 article, top of the list, childhood obesity. Major problem of 4, it's only going to get worse, leads to childhood diabetes, lower life expectancy, all kinds of problems. Number 2, not enough physical activity. Once again, only getting worse. More time online, less time exercising, less time playing. Drug abuse, alcohol abuse. Kids are getting depressed. They're going to turn to those kind of things. Going to turn to smoking. Bullying was a problem before. It's going to get worse because now they're online all the time with anonymity. Think about what that's going to do. Speaking of the internet safety, we're going to cover that. But basically, more time online, more exposure to predators. Child abuse and neglect, I'm sure, are on the rise now. People say safer at home. Not if you're in an abusive household. Those kids were safer in school. Stress was a problem. It's getting worse. Teen pregnancy. Kids aren't being supervised. They're not in schools. What do you think is going to happen? Back to the topic of socio-emotional development. But as we can see, it's really difficult to speak about just one because socio-emotional development, cognitive development, and physical health are so intimately intertwined. This Time magazine article, the coronavirus seems to spare most kids from illness, but its effects on their mental health is deepening. If COVID 19 is sparing most kids' bodies, it's not been so kind to their minds. Nobody is immune to the stress that comes with the pandemic and related quarantining. Children, however, may be at particular risk. Living in a universe that is already out of their control, they can become especially shaken when the verities they count on to give the world order, the rituals in their lives, the very day to dayness of living, get blown to bits. The article goes on to point out how there's a lack of research in this country, but there is some research in China. And when they took a sample group of 2,330 school children for signs of emotional distress, the kids had been locked down for what, to quarantine weary Americans, likely seems a relatively short period, an average of 33.7 days. Even after that single month, 22.6% of them reported depressive symptoms and 18.9% were experiencing anxiety. And that was just 1 month of quarantine. The article then goes on to quote a mother who's saying, "I'm seeing 100% more behavioral problems. My son, who has learning issues, has 3 meltdowns a day." And I know some of you out there know what she's talking about. With my daughter, the problem became an addiction to the iPad. She has a TikTok account and created an alias of an older girl. Uh-oh. We took the tablet away. Good job. And there were hysterics. I'm sure there were, but yeah, that's dangerous. She told us, "I want to be on the tablet all the time because when I am, I don't feel so lonely." Ugh. But yeah, who can't relate to that? Speaking of lonely, this article from Foundation for Economic Freedom, social isolation is damaging an entire generation of kids. Did you hear that? An entire generation. Is it necessary? We'll talk more about that later. Look at some more data, but they say, because of COVID 19, my husband and I have decided to skip pre K altogether and teach her everything she needs to know before kindergarten ourselves. This doesn't worry me academically, but I am concerned about her development and the loss of social interaction she was going to experience. Yeah, and you should be concerned, but not according to the advice columnist who says she is part of a whole generation of quarantine 5-year-olds. It'll take her a while to catch up once she re enters society, sure, but it's going to take everyone a while. Uh huh. Reminds me of this Krishnamurti quote: "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." I think about that one a lot. The article then goes on to describe how some kids are actually faring better than others, but a lot of kids are suffering. Then they make some obvious but really important points. Kids need other kids. Yeah. They quote the psychologist Peter Gray talking about the importance of play. He says, "Play is crucial to children's development, and much of my research shows that over the last few decades, our children have been very play deprived. They spend so much time in school, so much time in homework, so much time in adult-directed activities which are not fully play. Play is activity that children develop themselves, that children take control of themselves, and there children learn to be independent and solve their own problems," which is really important. And I'm going to quote him again later when he talks about how play helps us actually learn moral behavior and be better people. If they were play deprived prior to the pandemic, then many children may be more play deprived now, as they've been cut off from peers for nearly 6 months. Yeah. Gray has documented the correlation between the decline in play and the rise in childhood and adolescent mental health disorders. And I think it would be safe to link in some physical health disorders with that too, with the lack of exercise. This is something that is deeply concerning now, as children and especially adolescents are even more distanced from their peers. The article then goes on to point out how technology has been a quote unquote lifesaver, but with all this added time online and on social media, it's having a negative impact on our kids. Perhaps more startling, the survey found that 68% of parents say that social media is interfering with their teens' ability to have normal social interactions. I mean, that is if those are even a thing anymore, normal social interactions. But anyway, the continued quarantining of healthy children and adolescents is misguided and deprives them of the childhood play and in person social interaction that are critical to their growth and development. I agree with that 100%. The health risk to children of the virus may be small, but the risk to children's mental and emotional health from forced separation from peers is not. They quote John Miltimore as saying, "The best scientific evidence we have shows that children have the least to fear from COVID 19. As the CDC points out, the common flu is far more dangerous for children than the coronavirus. A society that deprives children of the basic freedom to gather, to play, learn, explore, and socialize does them a grave injustice, one that will result in far more harm than good. Fortunately, we have ample evidence and real life examples that show how the costs of quarantining healthy children far outweigh the benefits." And we're going to get into that article later. The author then asks a very important question: what can parents do? Which is the question here, because it's up to us. And she points out, we can't lift the government orders, but we can make the right choices for our kids. She says if schools aren't open for in-person learning, consider creating a pandemic pod this fall for consistent group play and learning, and encourage teams to gather for small in-person study groups and co-learning. And I would suggest even if it goes hybrid, we still need to be doing this. She suggests we should push back against the creeping government control of family life and question the politicians and pundits who keep telling you, and especially your kids, to stay home. Good job, Carrie McDonald. I really enjoyed this article. It really left me feeling more inspired and helped me affirm my decision to create what I'm currently creating here in Wilmington, Delaware. I'll take a second to plug it. It's called Ripple, which stands for Recreative In-Person Learning. It's music, dance, martial arts, drumming, and those are all involved in capoeira. And I've been blessed enough to be able to teach these things in schools in the U.S. and abroad for like the past decade or so. And in the past 3 years, I had the really awesome opportunity to have capoeira be part of the curriculum in a kindergarten through fifth grade school. And this year, I'm faced with the decision to teach remotely, try and adapt, and hope for the best, or leave my position. And I love my job teaching there. Not only was my class like a crowd favorite, it was also having a demonstrable positive effect on students and on the school culture in general. But I truly believe that the most meaningful lesson we teach our students is the example that we set for them. And I felt morally obligated to set the example of offering an alternative to provide what these kids need right now, the meaningful and positive experiences that I was offering before and that I want to continue to offer right now. Be the change, like they say. And I'll talk more about Ripple at the end of the video. And if you're in Newcastle County, Delaware, and you want to set something up, I'll have my contact info in there. And if you're not in Newcastle County, Delaware, and you just want to know what I'm doing and how it's going, or maybe collaborate, please reach out to me because we need to do this together. This is what's needed. But it's looking like the data suggests what's not needed are all these measures we're taking to quote unquote protect our kids. Sweden's results suggest we should stop quarantining healthy children. There's ample evidence and real life examples that show that the costs of quarantining healthy children far outweigh the benefits. Yeah, and they go on to point out how the risks to children are low. Normally, children get affected worse, but this is different. They talk about these pediatricians who would definitely send their kids back to school. And then they mention a study that hasn't been released yet in the UK. It says a new study has been done in the UK. Schools confirm there is very little evidence that the virus is transmitted in schools. The risks to children from COVID are very low. And then they talk about Sweden. And they say Sweden's approach was highly controversial, but the results of its policy were not. And they talk about them in comparison with Finland and how Sweden, who didn't do any of the lockdown, didn't close schools, didn't enforce social distancing, fared better than Finland. Which is why they were able to determine that the school policy had no measurable impact on the spread of the virus. But as we're seeing, and we're going to continue to see, it is going to have a measurable impact in other areas, and they're not going to be good. Gathering to play and learn is fundamental to children. The results from Sweden and the UK are important because research shows that allowing children to gather, play, learn, and explore is fundamental to their physical and mental health. Their attentional, emotional, and cognitive skills are sharpened when they interact with other children in settings that allow them to freely interact with and learn from others. It strengthens immune systems, psyches, and character. If we opt to shelter children from social gatherings and put them in front of screens all day, we sever them from one of the most important and effective learning pathways. And here's that second quote by Peter Gray about the importance of play that I mentioned earlier. Social play is the primary natural means of every child's social and moral education. It is through play that children learn to get along with others. In play, they must take into account the other children's needs, learn to see from other point of view, learn to compromise, learn to negotiate differences, learn to control their own impulses, learn to please others so as to keep them as playmates. So basically learning empathy and how to be a good person and function properly in society. This is a form of natural learning through social interaction, one that cannot be replicated through a school lesson or homework assignment. Depriving children of social interaction has consequences beyond lost learning, however. Gray and other psychologists link the documented increases in anxiety and depression in children to trends showing a general decline of free play, a consequence of education systems that increasingly forego free learning for formalized instruction, such as worksheets and test prep. While the detriments of rigid classroom instruction are apparent, emerging evidence suggests social isolation is even worse. Yeah. And research is suggesting that it's affecting adolescent girls adversely. More and more depression and anxiety. Look at some of these headlines. Impact of isolation on childhood development. Parents must learn to control pandemic stress and anxiety with children at home. All these headlines about suicides on the rise because these kids are feeling hopeless. It's up to us to offer some hope to them. which is what I'm trying to do and grow here in Wilmington, Delaware. But now back to cognitive development and all that screen time from the New York Presbyterian. What does too much screen time do to children's brains? My guess is it messes them up. Early data from a landmark National Institutes of Health study that began in 2018 indicates that children who spent more than 2 hours a day on screen time activities scored lower on language and thinking tests. And some children with more than 7 hours a day of screen time experienced thinning of the brain's cortex, the area of the brain related to critical thinking and reasoning. Yep. And the article goes on to say how the researchers aren't really completely sure what the data means, which to me, I'm wondering maybe they had too much screen time because it's pretty obvious to me what it means. Screen time is detrimental in large amounts. The article does, though, point out how screen time is especially detrimental to kids under the age of 3 because their minds are developing so rapidly, their brains are developing, and they should be learning about the world around them by interacting with their immediate environment and imitating the people around them, which, come to think of it, they probably are imitating the people around them because they're probably staring at their phones too. But these kids develop a kind of tunnel vision, and it's scary. I've seen it with kids, and it's really troubling to me to see a kid that won't even make eye contact because they want to keep looking back at their screen. They talk about that, as the article points out here. When I see children walking with a parent or being pushed in a stroller, they are often playing on a smartphone or a tablet and not paying attention to anything else around them. They will not learn about the world around them if all they're doing is looking at a smartphone. Yeah. And I've seen a bunch of people almost get run over from doing that. And they give guidelines here about how much screen time is okay. And as you might have guessed, it's less time than remote learning is requiring for them. And I actually had a friend talking to his ex teacher because he decided to homeschool. And the teacher was saying that he was getting in trouble for not exposing the kids to enough screen time. Can you believe that? And it's not just the screen time that's a problem. As we mentioned before, here's some tips to keep kids safe from the new dangers that come with distance learning. And threat number 2 is online predators. They talk about how more people have access to devices now and technology. They're online more time. A lot of these kids are younger, aka more innocent, more naive, and more vulnerable and susceptible to what these creeps are trying to do because they know our kids are online all the time, and so are they. And they talk about how in Montgomery County, they've already charged 59 defendants for internet crimes against children. And that number is just going to keep going up. And one way we can protect our kids from online predators is not allowing them to be online or not forcing them to be online all the time. It says how the increased time kids are spending on the internet is increasing the risk of predators contacting and grooming children online. And just think about what we talked about earlier with that girl making an older girl alias on TikTok. It says the most important thing for parents is to be engaged. You might think you know all the new social media apps and how kids can communicate with others. You don't. Not only that, kids are being bombarded with online ads, sometimes graphic in school and now at home. And here's a good question. Who's vetting these apps and websites kids are using for school? The answer is nobody is because nobody's had time to because this is all new and it's been one big scramble and people are just trying to keep their heads above water. Who has time to vet and make sure the kids are safe and their data's safe? Like they point out here, some parents question what Google might be up to with all that data. Yeah, I'm asking the same question myself as well as the other apps, Zoom and all that. What are they doing with that? But surveillance capitalism is a whole topic on its own. I just wanted to touch on it briefly here in regards to privacy rights because I think it's really important. I think it's something we all need to be concerned about. And then there's the access issues, right? Because this is a major problem. It was a problem in my school last year when we went online for what was supposed to be 2 weeks and ended up being the remainder of the school year. And it's a big equity issue. Like it says here, it's impossible to separate academics from digital access. Not to mention the fact that it's now basically illegal to not have internet in a device if you have a kid who's registered in school. We're all basically mandatory homeschooling for who knows how long. And parents have added expenses. Like, for example, I found out our local YMCA is offering remote learning supervision for $250 a week. So now parents are faced with paying $1,000 a month just so your kid is compliant and attending an extremely poor substitute for the education our tax dollars were already paying for. All that with the economy the way it is. And more people are feeling obligated to hire tutors, even withdrawing their kids from school, because they know online learning isn't working. And that's the last point I want to make here, because we've seen how remote learning, increased screen time, social isolation, and other measures that have been taken to protect our children are actually putting them much more at risk, from anxiety, depression, even suicidal tendencies, to staying sedentary, leading to more childhood obesity, and the myriad of problems being overweight brings about. We've discussed how more time online increases the threat of online predators, even how big tech and advertisers are taking advantage of our kids in the current situation. We've seen and probably experienced how all of this screen time is leading to scream time, and that it's messing up our kids' brains, perhaps forever. Adding to the problem, play, as we've discussed, is an integral part of healthy growth and development in children, and adults too, I would argue, and play is being eradicated even further. Have you ever noticed how every animal learns how to survive through forms of play? But besides all of that, at the end of the day, kids aren't learning like this. Well, they're learning things, but maybe not the intended lessons, right? And most of us by now have experienced the tragic comedy that is Zoom meetings. Um, you're on mute. We can't hear you. Also, some other people might need to mute themselves. Oh, wait, I was on mute. I mean, this is adults that can't figure it out. Imagine kids. And my heart goes out to everyone who has had to deal with the gauntlet that is teaching online, especially with young kids. So I'll end with this article, because at the end of the day, tragedy does make the best comedy sometimes, and we need to laugh to keep from crying these days. So I found this article, and definitely some of these tweets had me laughing out loud, because sometimes when you just hit the nail on the head so hard, it's hilarious. Downloaded 87,642 new apps just to communicate with my kid's school. Yeah, I know what you mean. I had to download them too to communicate with parents. Zoom preschool is both hilarious and depressing. My 4-year-old keeps unmuting himself and yelling, I don't know your name. Is this meeting over yet? Zoom second grade is fun. When my son gets bored, he closes the laptop and walks away. Technical issues, he yells. Yeah, we've had that happen to us. It's called remote learning because of the remote chance my kids are going to learn anything, and I've made that joke right from the beginning. Same with Imagine learning software. Yeah, hope you got a good imagination. One kid in my daughter's first grade class figured out how to change his background to Amtrak, and he'd yell in the middle of class, "Gotta go, my train is here." Hilarious. Current topic of Zoom kindergarten: how to raise your hand so that it doesn't get cropped out by the camera. What a waste of time. This one made me laugh too. Not even part of the way through day one of school, my 11-year-old has lost 2 pens, a calculator, a pencil, and a notebook. She's been sitting at the kitchen table the whole time. How? And the unmute button, we all know how awkward that can get. Kindergarten Zoom gym class punctuated by a parent saying, "I'm just over it," loudly over and over again. And then, "Oh, are you unmuted?" So this is what we're doing instead to combat all this. This is a little video I showed a little bit earlier. But this is what we're doing here at Ripple. I'm taking these kids out of the park. We're learning important things. We're moving to the beat. We're making eye contact. We're interacting. We're learning how to defend ourselves, gaining confidence. It's just amazing. This is one of the only things that's been getting me through this whole little scenario. Is still being able to contact my kids, get out there, and just see them grow and develop, and see them smile and have fun. Maybe even kick each other a little bit, but everybody's clapping, everybody's singing, and people are loving learning. That was one of the biggest lessons my teacher taught me. It was like, it's really easy. All you have to do is make people fall in love with what you teach, and then your job's easy from that point on. We even got the parents involved. This is a great day, and I can't wait to do more and more of this. Like I said, if you're in Newcastle County, Delaware, and you'd like to set something up like this in a park near you, I'm open. I'm looking for more. This is the Ripple Effect, recreative in-person learning. We put the fun in learning, and you can see there's my email down there. You can also inbox me in whatever social media outlet you saw this video on. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you can share this video if you found it informative and you think the message is important, which I do. Like I said, it's up to us to protect our kids. I know people are scared. I know some of these things might seem controversial, but it's time for facts over fear, and it's time to do what's right for our kids. What's the real risk here?